There it is. I'm just going to override the left one because that's the only one I'm looking at right now. And at the beginning, let's set the ditch depth to, so I'm going to modify, I'll set the ditch depth to, whoops, I'm not setting a ditch depth here, I'm setting an elevation. And you can read the elevations on the section window, 720, 725, so let's say 724. And at the end, well, let's go to roughly the same elevation at the end. Modify. 724. Okay. Let's see what that looks like. Okay. You can actually see this is a little higher at this end, so maybe maybe I should change that to 724.5. We'll do that on the next iteration. But the important thing is I want the middle to be deeper. So let's go back to the overrides. It's remembered where I was last time, so I don't have to select it again. Change that to 725 or 724.5, say. And then I'm going to add a new one. We'll call this creek. It doesn't really matter what you put in the description, just for your own reference. And we'll make that 723, so it's definitely going down. Station number, right, that should be halfway between is about 200. There we go. So from 0 to 200, it's going in a smooth, linear way from 724 to 723, and then from 200 to the end, it's going back up to 724.5 elevation. There it is. So our ditch is sloping down towards the gully. That's what we wanted. And now you can see how that behaves in the cross-section window. As I move back through the alignment, you can see the ditch getting bigger and bigger and bigger. There's my beginning of my abutment. And finally, we're into the bridge. Still in the bridge, there's the other side, and the ditch is deep, and then it slowly gets shallower as we get to the other end. Well, that's overriding a parameter using the assign parameters by range overrides. To accommodate ditch by elevation, what we've done here is we've set up essentially a second vertical alignment by picking 3 elevation points to define the ditch independent of the centerline alignment. Go back to the template editor for a second. Ditch elevation. Okay. In this case, the ditch elevation is only an elevation. In some templates, you can actually apply a what we call a reference feature, and I'm going to show you that in the next example. So the alignment for the ditch could be attached to another external feature, like maybe an existing creek or something. Okay, well, I don't have that ability here, so let's go on to the next example. Okay, no questions. Let's go on to the next one. So the important part here is that I showed you how to create a new template. I showed you how to replace components as we did in the first example. And assigning templates, we covered how to assign different templates. And you can also assign templates left and right. And then we overrode one of the values of the parameters. So let's now look at a third example. I'm going to do a widening example. So I'm going to start with a new alignment again, new design, and I'm going to find my widening example. Here it is. Now this is an important step. I've done File New. I've picked my original ground. That's pretty straightforward. And now I have a choice. Do you want to draw your alignment, or do you want to read it in? Well, I can read in an alignment from a land.xml file. In this case, I'm just going to read in a feature in terrain, which was the surveyed center line. So there's already a road. There's already a center line. Why should I spend a lot of time redesigning it if all I want to do is widen the road without changing the center line? So that's what I'll do. I'll pick the current feature, all points, and say OK, and it reads it in. Now, there is a trick to that. It's important that the terrain actually had the current point select, or the current feature correctly selected. I don't know if you've seen this little trick before. From Plan Options, Background, you can actually edit any of the backgrounds by clicking on Open here. And this background is, of course, my original ground. It's called the topo terrain. And you can see that the center line is selected as the current feature. It's called CL. Now, there's another feature in here that's quite important. It's this one here. That feature is called 112-47, not a very nice name, but that's what it's called. And it represents the edge of the shoulder. I'm going to use that to define my super elevation later. I actually didn't need to open terrain to figure that out, and I'll show you that in a sec. So this is then a surface that represents an existing road. There's an intersection, and then further down there's a curve. There's that gully we were playing around with in the last example. And that curve is super elevated, and the survey picks it up and shows it. Okay, so I've got a nice terrain. Don't need to look at that anymore. And because I used that center line as my initial alignment, my road already exists. It's already got a bunch of IPs that represent the surveyed points. It's even got a vertical alignment that represents the surveyed points, and it's following right along the ground. The ground in this case being the center line of the road. Let's get an appropriate template here. So now the widening template is, oops, I clicked on the wrong button. Let's go into the template editor. I'm just using my normal TPL. That's what I get by default. I'm going to open a different table. And I've got one here called wide. Now the default template is, we've seen this a lot. It's pretty much our standard rural paved template. It's got 3 layers and pavement. But the important template I'm going to be using here is called widening. And I'm not quite sure why it's set up to be asymmetric, but it's got nothing happening on the first bit near the center line. And then there's the same 3 layers, pavement, base 1, base 2, fill, ditch, etc. So it looks a lot like rural paved, except it doesn't do anything near the center line. Great. So that's what I wanted. Let's see how that works. I'm going to apply it. Now it turns out I only want to apply this thing on the left-hand side. And I really don't want anything to be applied everywhere else. So let's first of all apply to both sides the bridge template everywhere, dot, dot to dot, dot. Then I will pick my widening template, whoops, left-hand side, widening template, and I've done this before, so I know that I don't need to start widening the road until station 100 because there's a turning lane already there. Add edit, there we go. So on the left-hand side, there's nothing until 100, and then it's widening. On the right-hand side, it's just nothing. Good. Recalculate, and so at the beginning, there's nothing. Let's look at the plan. And as we move along the alignment, there, it starts doing its widening thing. Well, that looks kind of good. The road is already wide there, but as we move along the alignment, you can see that the road isn't very wide, and now my widening template is extending it to 2 lanes from 1 lane. And it's doing that by cutting away the old shoulder and refilling it with these well-designed engineered materials. Great. It's not quite following the old roadway exactly. And if we get into the super elevation part, it's not doing a good job at all. Let's take a look at the curve. I'm just scrolling along here in the plan window, and aha, there's my curve. Let's take a look at a cross-section there, and you can see that the widening template is doing a very poor job of matching the existing alignment. It's cutting away all the old super elevated road and making it flat. Well, this could be a real problem. Changing the super elevation of the widening template to match the old road would take an awful lot of overrides, and it would be a painfully trial and error process. What I'll do instead is I'll bring in a reference feature and tie my template to the reference feature. Well, first let's get that reference feature. As I mentioned before, the feature that I need is already in the road here, in the background, sorry, and it's called, I'm having trouble finding it. I wrote it down, which is good. You can see the name of the features I'm hovering over. That one. That's 112. Whoops, that's 112. Yeah, that's the one I want. Okay. So I want that to be a reference feature. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can make a reference feature. Module setup, alignment, features is where you can do it. But this dialog box is accessible from all over the place. For example, in the section window, if I'm interested in seeing reference features, section options, reference features, plus sign, there it is again. Similarly, if I want to do something in my template, like for example, tie we're only working with the left-hand one, tie the crossfall to a reference feature, there's that dialog box again. Well, let's create the reference feature from the cross-section window, because I think that'll kind of give you an idea of what it's all about. Section options, let's make this big. Section options, reference features turned on, options for reference features. I'm just going to pick RF1 as my reference feature, it doesn't really matter, and click on definition. Taking it out of my original ground surface, and I'm going to find it. It's called 112.